Okay, this is a fun one, breaking down why it's a terrible idea to stay in your lane.
Yeah, we get into why you shouldn't stay in your lane in your career, why you shouldn't stay in your lane as a brand, why thinking outside of your category is important, all of the things. Why it's actually very critical in the age of AI and the age of authorship. I mean, we get into a lot.
We do. It's more important than ever. Take a listen. Let us know what you think.
Enjoy. Hey everyone, it's Chris.
And Kirsten.
Welcome to Good Thinking Weekly, the podcast where we discuss the best of the best in brands, marketing, and culture.
Thousands of people, top execs from the likes of Complex, Klaviyo, Walmart, Wall Street Journal, and LVMH tune in every single week.
We run a creative consultancy in Good Co, so we know what it takes to build a good brand.
Subscribe on YouTube, your favorite podcast app, and Good Thinking on Substack for more.
All right, let's dive in.
Welcome to Good Thinking and how not to stay in your lane.
Which we're professionally good at, so welcome to the most professional podcast we've ever done.
Here we go. Yeah, or we could just talk about straightening hair, which really, if anybody has the unlock, please come at us in the comments. Like, I need help. Okay, so this is a conversation that we talk about a lot. And in reflecting back on it in a lot of different areas that hopefully we're going to encompass today. You like the visuals for those of you who
We're going
can't
to try
see
to bring it together. We're going to try to bring together a Venn diagram of many ideas.
Yes. But it came back to me when I was talking at LMU to the students last week. And it was just like, it was kind of very obvious to me, but it felt important to say. And somebody asked me a question, which maybe by the time we write this, I'll remember what that was, but I don't right now. But it felt important for me to say, like, hey guys, I just want to make sure this isn't happening. Like, you can be anything you want to be, and you don't have to just be in this like diagram of a version of marketing or a brand or whatever track you're necessarily in. You can do all of the things and do them well. So don't let anybody basically put you in a corner.
And now more than ever, but we'll get into that and why that's true. But yes. And I think we both live this, like, you live this independent of me and I live this independent of you. And then we found each other and then we like amplified it and it like, who knows what happened.
Right. Totally. But I think going back, starting on kind of which feels like the most basic level to me is like career wise, it was something certainly that like I always describe it as much easier to describe. It works much better, as you get higher up in your career, right? To be a brand, an intern, or to be like a brand manager and be able to be like, no, I'm much more, I'm bigger picture. I'm kind of creative director-ish, like only gets you so far, especially in corporate. Whereas the idea of it, if you really keep pushing forward, which I know both of us did, then when you're kind of later in your career and you have that opportunity, you really do have this expansive view of all of the parts and pieces of, brand, editorial, writing, strategy, thinking, creative, design, like all of these parts and pieces versus only knowing to do one.
Yes. How do you think you got there? Because I have a story of how I got there, but how do you think you got there?
In hindsight, I mean, I can see it, but then I didn't. I just believe and knew that I had this bigger picture. I think it's interesting because I came up through the industry really through fashion and it was like visual merchandising and it was buying and it was, a magazine. It was kind of, I think, able to be exposed pretty young to kind of all of the parts and pieces of what a brand world can be. And I was very fortunate in that. I certainly didn't realize it at the time, but I think I kept pushing forth with that view. Even as I went more into kind of corporate brands and things, I still had that view that no, a brand is this entire world that I'd been exposed to. And because I was then, in a creative industry or as a creative director, but I hadn't, I'm not a trained designer. I've never been a trained designer. That's never been the track that I've wanted, but I've come up in a very creative way, probably more through visual merchandising. And I understood creative and I was a creative. And so I would have it from a more maybe editorial perspective. And so, I think like it'd be interesting to have your reflection on this because my story and kind of obviously where I am. But I think I would have to kind of almost explain and push my way through. But because I'd been exposed to that vision early on, I kept that with me.
Yeah.
That track?
So I think that does track. That tracks for me. And I think that one of the things that comes up for me is that I too Like, so I went to RISD, right? And RISD has this thing called a winter session. Like, they build their entire curriculum around, like, not pigeonholing you. Like, they actually break you out of your pigeonhole. Like, that's what the entire, like, there's a whole semester that's just dedicated to that. 6 weeks where you're not allowed to do what you were doing with who you were doing
I
it, no
love
matter
that.
what.
Love that.
Impossible, right? It was a mental health play originally. And I think that's such an interesting, like,
Oh,
signal to
wow.
people of, yeah, so it was there because people were not doing well. And they were like, oh, this is allows them mental freedom to, like, do something else. But then when they started seeing what it would do, then it became, like, really obvious it was super powerful, right? And I think that one of the things that's really interesting now, or maybe, like, I would say not right now, but maybe for the last 10 years, possibly, is that you would go and you would literally pick a track and you're like, oh, I'm going to be a performance marketer. And that would be your lane, right? Like, it's like you're going to go down this lane and you're literally going to, like, have, like, this almost linear track in your career where, like, you go from intern performance marketer to mid-level performance marketer to senior performance marketer to head of digital marketing to, like, maybe you end up the CMO, maybe. But it was still like a little arrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people would train that for the last 10 years that is how you get ahead. That is how you make your world. And they're no longer being exposed to, like, on a foundational level, that
Yeah.
that's not how to operate. Whereas I just came into, like, RISD's pretty untraditional. And so I just assumed this was, like, how everybody did everything. And, like, it did never occur to me that that's not how. And literally, I had this teacher, maybe we've talked about him before, but he was in industrial design. And he was like, I'm not training you to be the intern. I'm training you to be the head of the company. Like, whether that's CEO, CMO, chief of technology, whatever, I'm not really interested. I'm training you to be up here, to think like the person up here, and how you get there is not my business. And he was like, and everything about my career and everything about that education was nonlinear. And I think that when you were exposed to kind of all the things that you were exposed to a world and not told that there were boundaries on that world, right?
For sure.
And so for the rest of your life, you assume that there was no boundaries. And when everyone was like, oh, but there are boundaries, you're like, yeah, but, like, are there really boundaries? Like, is that really how you do
100%.
things? And I think that we both operate from that perspective. But meanwhile, like, I can tell you 1,000 podcasts that will tell you how to grow your agency and tell you how to do everything. And they will tell you niche down. And I think that that is proven to be maybe one of the most dangerous pieces of advice that has ever been given out in the corporate world, because we are about to enter an age where niching down is literally like a weakness versus a superpower. And you've been
100%.
trained to think that it was your superpower. And so now you're entering this world and you're in the age of authorship. And, like, you know, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go read the article. But, like, you're about to be expected to be the CFO, the CTO, the CMO, the founder, possibly actually be all four of those things. And if you don't know how to think like that, you're in trouble.
100%. 100%. Yeah. And I think it's fascinating. You know, originally started this conversation just because I think it's important to say, like, I think we both feel like a real desire to be a part of, like, next gen and you know, mentor, kind of be the mentor that we maybe both wish we had or we did have. But I think it's really important to say in that way. And I think bringing up kind of where we are today, like, it's like, wow, that's pretty in your face, right? To be able to say, like, well, this thing is really important just so that people can go and create and do maybe what they already want to do. But then you bring up kind of the mental health aspect of it, which from an agency perspective is huge, because there's a lot of challenges mental health wise across the board if you're kind of within the agency or really just the marketing track in general, I would say. And then moving to where we are today / tomorrow, as far as age of authorship, like, you know, what we've been sold is for sure a bill of goods. Maybe it was right at the time, but it's certainly not right today as far as niching down and being only this one thing. For sure, it's, I think, I've read a few things around neurodivergent and just thinking in a completely different way is going to be such a superpower, which I completely believe and know in kind of, you know, tomorrow and today.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think it's really interesting because, like, we wrote a rough outline, guys. As you can tell, we just carry off on the riffs that we go off
pretty
of.
rough.
But, like, in the outline, no, I mean, it was pretty thorough, but like, it was like in the outline, you brought up like, how does this apply to good thinking, right? And like, we've
Yes.
talked about this a bunch, but like, I had so much, I don't know if it was shame or fear, probably more fear of like, everyone literally like, I mean, there's a very famous podcast, and I'm sure that if you've listened to it, I don't need to call them out, and like, there are bees in there. But like, they literally tell you that the only way to be successful as an agency is to like, you just have to be so niche that you can't like niche any further. Like, and I was listening to this podcast for like a year, and I was like, oh my God, like, you know, my life is ruined. It's like, how am I going to come to accept this? Da, 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 da. And the minute that I'd like stopped listening to somebody else's opinion and just listened to my own opinion, like things got better. But like, people care about other categories. Like, there are literally there's not one consumer who operates in your category solely. Like, not one. There's not one human being who's like, oh, I only consume F&B goods, or I only like wellness, or I only travel. No, they do all of these things, and they're exposed to all of these brands all the time. So why people tell themselves that like, oh, we need to work with an agency that specializes in this particular topic, or we need to work with a strategist who has auto experience. It's like, guys, your consumer has never had your category experience ever. And they're really uninterested in having it. Like, completely uninterested in having it. And more like, they are not interested in seeing the things that they see all the time. We have so much fatigue, and I can like, it's not just category, but it's like styles. Like, I think about like, God, like the intense era of like D2C.
Blanding.
And then I think of the like, there was blanding, and then was maximalizing, and then there's this, and then there's that. And now we have like, you know, AI-isms everywhere, and it's just like, we're very good at spotting those things. Like, you guys think that you spot an M dash, we all spot an M dash. Like, whether or not I used to use an M dash before, now I'm like literally triggered when I see one. I'm like,
You are.
God.
Yes, you are.
Like, stop.
That's true.
Like, because I go in and I edit them out, because it's like they're adding them everywhere. And everyone is good at that. Like, we are all good at that.
Right. So that's what kind of reflecting back on it. And we again, we talk about this a lot, but it's the not choosing a lane is reflective throughout kind of our lives, and both, I think, because that's kind of what we've done, but also it's where the interest is. So in good thinking, you know, people, even after that you had the letter and it was out in writing, people were like, oh, you know, you really need to narrow down, be one category, make sure your expertise. And I think, you know, again, rebelling against that and being like, no, and you didn't do it for any like, oh, I've researched all of these things, and actually these newsletters are popular. You were like, fuck it, this is what's interesting to me. I want to write the letter that I want to receive. So I'm going to do that. And it's all of these categories. It's not one, it's not two, it's not three. It's all of these. And the real magic and the through thread is actually in the commonality, in connecting the dots, in all of those parts and pieces. And that's really in identifying that, which you do in the letter. But I think really understanding that, like, you don't have to niche down and you don't have to only have these interests, because most likely most people don't have those interests. And to your point, the consumers certainly don't have those interests. But I think, like, to me, number two is in good think and in not niching down. And that's been a success, not in spite of, but because of.
Yeah. I even read about it this week. I was saying that, like, one of the things is so funny. There's this great AI, and great, I say, like, with quotes, maybe because for somebody it is great. It's called No Scroll, and it's like this literal like AI that you can train to read your Substacks and your emails and everything that you get, like your RSS feed, and it will just like pull up things that you're interested in, right? And on the surface, you're like, wow, it's so helpful. And then I think to myself, like, but actually, like, you know, like, somebody sent me a newsletter about robotics, and then like I have an interest in robotics, but suddenly like I start reading about all these things, see things that I'm interested in, and then I start writing about robotics, and then more things interest me about robotics, and then I see a similarity between this and that, and and that's the future, right? Like, you don't get anywhere by only doing the things that you're already good at, or reading the things that you're already good at. Like, it doesn't move you forward, which is also the part that really bothers me about when people are like, oh, I want you to niche down, or I want you to work in this category. Like, you're not getting better. You are becoming potentially more expert, but you're not like growing. And I think that ultimately, like what we're all seeking is growth, I think.
Amen. I'm here for that. First in line. So let's talk about that, because we absolutely often hear from clients or potential clients of like, well, do you have expertise in that category? Whether it's pet, whether it's tech, whether it's whatever it is, like, do you have expertise in that category? And I know for us, ideally it's no, because I think it's, about taking our expertise, and we've been doing this for a long time. We know a lot of things, and bringing that. But I think it's also to a degree a beginner's mentality, because what tech was yesterday, what it is today is completely different. The reason that so many wellness brands, pet brands, DTC brands all look the same is because you've got the same, three people, three agencies doing all of the things, and there's no differentiation. And I know I wouldn't want that for my brand. So to me, it's about having an expertise in what you do, but ideally a beginner's mindset, so that you're not looking the best out of, looking just kind of the best or trying to be a better version of the guy who's been leading in that particular category.
Yes. I mean, I think it's interesting because I kind of never have a beginner's mindset anymore because of how much I've written. So it's like really like, it's like, I got a lot of thoughts. But I think it's interesting, like there's, and there are very great agencies that like make, a lot of work in the same category. But like, it's a little bit like when you're an agency that's worked at Nike, which we have, right? You become really, really good. Like I can write a Nike manifesto in my sleep. Like I am really good at that. I'm also very good at translating it to other categories and other sentiments. And it's not to say that we write a Nike manifesto every time, but it's like, there are a lot of people that need that kind of like rah, like, nothing holds us back feeling. And like that can work. And I just never understand, to me, like it never makes sense to me why you would look. And I hear this all the time. I have a lot of friends who run a lot of agencies, and they literally like become like famous for like one client or one category. And then they're like, can you just do that like for us? And let me tell you, it fails every time, every single time. Because if you don't have the perspective of your own and have a vision for where you're going, like you can start there, have a mood board, great. But like if you're just like, oh, I want to riff off this, even if it's in a different category, that won't ever work. Like it never works.
Right.
Period.
And that's where I say beginner's mentality, because I think it is taking your expertise, but not just staying in that category and doing like the next version of it. It's like, okay, well, if I were to start over today, and because the world is, especially now, moving so quickly and things are so different, that I think to come to the table with expertise, with a point of view, but also, how do we make this not just the best in the category, but how do we redefine the category? And to me, that's really the thing. That's the change.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they're doing so great right now, but I don't think that this is because of their brand. But like, it makes me always like, I think of like Southwest, for example. Like I always appreciated how Southwest like came in and was just like, no, like we're going to approach it in our own way. Regardless of how they're doing right now, like pull a group of consumers around like how they feel about Southwest until they like remove free baggage. Pull them and like the sentiment is really high. Like the sentiment of like this brand stands for something, means something, because they took something and they were like, okay, like if we were reinventing it, like where are people's priorities today? Because what you're building for is the moment that you're in, and you can take all this knowledge and all these things, but consumers are changing all the time, and like you have to create a place that they want to go, but you also have to be like of the moment, and it's quite challenging. But it's like if you're just trying to reiterate like something that's happened before, it just never works.
For sure. And I think Southwest is a great example, and I think a lot of brands that are really killing it right now are taking a page, is that what we say? Taking a page out of a playbook that's for a completely different category, right? Even say like Gap, I think comes to mind, right? Like they're not like, oh, what in retail, like what would be the move here? They're like, okay, if we were an entertainment brand, what would we be doing? If we were, and I think about Dixon doing that. Like I think the brands that are really killing it are really, going back to and really seeing this entire world of their potential. And that is not just within, their expertise category. It's like, what are the possibilities within that world for them to play in?
Right. Yeah. 100%. And I think that, like that's the danger of like working with people like, you know, there are a lot of CMOs right now that, again, grew up in like a really specific like area. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
CEOs, CMOs and CEOs that I see who are doing really well, like maybe have like a slightly less linear path to where they were. And so they
Mm-hmm.
see like it's like, oh, like I think of Bobby, you know, and Kim, like she came up in the PR world, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
she understands like, but she's now leading brand, right? Like, but it's like she leads that from a different mentality, like a mental space. Or I think of Carmen at Genexa, and like
Mm-hmm.
she comes from like, she's like, oh, okay, like, you know, she grew up in a brand that was like super experiential, like Frida. So she comes in and she's like, oh, like, you know, like we can play like this. Like we don't have to just do social. We don't have to just do performance marketing. And I think that those are the brands that are really connecting with people, because quite honestly, your consumer doesn't just experience you on social. They just don't experience you in retail. They just don't experience you. I mean, certainly almost no one's experiencing you online anymore because they're experiencing you through AI. Like, it's just, the world is changing very, very fast. And like, you know, I wrote about, I never know if you say, I think it's GANNI, but like, it's like, I
It's
wrote
got it.
about
Yeah.
them this weekend,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, they're really struggling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think about like, they're a group of people that like didn't, I think they just looked at themselves. They literally like were like, we're a niche of
Mm.
one. And they were just like, they iterated, like kind of like replicated off of, like it was like spawning small babies of themselves over and over and over again until they forgot who they were. I like don't know how to explain them better.
Right, right. But I think that's interesting because I want to talk more and like ideally identify some takeaways, both for individuals and then also for brands. Because I think, you know, GANNI, and we're just going with that it's GANNI. That's always how I've pronounced it. I think one of the great things that they've had is a point of view, right? They've said like, we are,
They had
you
one
know,
originally.
right. Well, I think that's the interesting thing. And I think you're spot on as far as like they had a point of view, whether or not they've, you know, they've lost that for who knows what reason. But I think what we're not saying is like have everybody's point of view. You want to have I think having a very clear point of view of, and that's why I think strategy is only becoming more and more important from a brand standpoint, because you need to know where's your point of view really coming from, and you need to have that rooted in something, but have kind of that very clear point of view of kind of where you're going and who you want to be big picture, as far as you can see what's that North Star. But then it is, you know, experimenting, trying things within other categories. It is like, what do you see as kind of the parts and pieces that you bring in from a brand standpoint?
Yeah. I mean, I mean, maybe we don't need to use them as an example, but I think like, you know, we can evolve it. But like, I think the one thing that, so GANNI like did this thing where they had one great store, right? And they literally like replicated the store like over and over and over again, right? Then you think of somebody like Aesop, right? Who doesn't do that. When I thought of GANNI, like it's almost like, again, comes back to this idea of like contracts and AI and like, but I've been thinking about this idea of contracts like for ever since I wrote about it this weekend. But it's like, I feel like when you sign a contract with GANNI, like you're signing up for like experimental. Like that's what you signed up for. Like, so I want to be on your journey of like being a little bit more experimental, like within the
Mm-hmm.
realms of like quite good design. Like, but take me on this journey. Like, where am I going and where am I going to get to? I don't know. But like, that's what I signed up for. But so then when
Mm-hmm.
you iterate off of yourself and you create exactly the same cool store, but it's like literally the same colors, literally the same template, literally the same products, you have made the same literal products like for the last 2 years, like iterating off of one another, like you are no longer fulfilling said contract of like, I signed up for experimental, right? And so this is diverging a little bit from the topic we had, but like, again, it's like when you come in, it's like, take me on these journeys, take me into these worlds. Like there's many ways that you could take that strategy. Like, let's just say it's a very broad
Mm-hmm.
strategy, but it's like strategy of like, we're a place where you get to design, like design meets experimental in
Experiments.
every
Yeah.
like that could take you to many, many different realms. And that's what consumers expect and want from brands today. Like I fundamentally believe that. Like they want to experience it on your website, on your like social, on like I think that's what like Jonathan has done so well, right? Like when you go to his like JW Anderson, blah, 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 yeah. When you go to his website,
Gotcha.
like
We're with you.
it's like exactly the thing you signed up for, just like a new version of it, right? Like when he released his new website, it's like, whoa, like I don't really know where I am, but it's exactly where I thought it would be. Didn't know it was going to be there. And I think, and he does that in every respect. And he's been doing that at Dior, right? Like when we went to Dior, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, wow. Like I'm signing up. I know what I contracted with Dior, but then you're taking me on a whole new journey of that. Like you're going to take me through experiential of that. You're taking me through products of that. You're taking me like actually seeing it on the runway in a different way than it's ever been seen before. Like all of these different multifaceted things, like that's what consumers expect, want, and have a contract with. And if you can do that really well strategically, like you take them on a journey through that, through
Right. You
many
sign them up for the
facets.
ride. Right. Right. I'm following you. I'm picking up what you're putting down. So I think what we're really saying is we started to say like this idea, this advice of stay in your lane is fucking for the birds, right? It shouldn't have worked from the start. It's way too pigeonholed. It doesn't make any sense. And not only, and now kind of where we're going. So don't do that as a human being. If you're a student, don't do that if you're, a human being that's also has a job and kind of in that world. And then I think where we're really landing, which I know you and I both believe is like the people who are winning, the people who are really doing it right, the brands who are really doing it right, the ones we want to be a part of are doing actually the exact opposite of that. They have kind of this great vision, but it's kind of all encompassing within that vision. Like whether it's a CMO of kind of all of this variety of backgrounds and kind of understand how to look at a brand in many different facets, whether it's a brand and you really kind of painting the world in kind of all of these different ways and understand how to evolve that, what that's going to look like next year, the following season, et cetera, because they kind of have that vision, but it's kind of the exact opposite of staying in your lane.
Exactly. Like, I think it's, we talk about Othership as an example, but like they created
Mm-hmm.
Ascend, they created this, they created that. Like they didn't just say, we're going to make a bathhouse and make it like every bathhouse we've ever seen before, because honestly, I've been to a lot of them and they're all mostly copycats of one another. And now a lot of them are copycats of Othership, right? But like, then it's just like, but they didn't, how they got there was that they didn't stay in their lane. They did it like they were like, oh, we're going to steal from an ayahuasca journey for this experience. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
take inspiration from the best stores in the world that smell like amazing when you go in, but you can't really put your your finger on why it like feels so good in here, but it's lighting, it's this and that. And you kind of pull together essentially this incredible brand. But if they came from a very non-traditional background, right? And so I think one of the things that I've seen pretty typically is that you either are working with an extremely like visionary brand, and I would put that in them in that category, where they understand that there's like a big picture, and then when people like have ideas that shape into that vision, they can kind of say, yes, that works, this doesn't, like they get it. But when you meet people who have grown up like only in one category, like retail expert, like they've had a very traditional background, or like, it's like, oh, I grew up in only luxury brands, for example,
Mm-hmm.
pretty typical. They have a much harder time of understanding that like the consumer no longer sees them like playing. Like you're playing in a world that no longer exists. Your consumer isn't there, but they don't see it as easily, I think, as people who've come from outside of category and kind of created something new.
Right. I totally agree with that. And I think that's across the board. I think for me, coming at it, like neither of us really have come from the agency background. And I think not knowing the rules really, for me, allows you to break them, right? I mean, I think also when I know the rules, I can break them. But I think really just coming at it, like that's the perspective of just like, for me, it's really about asking, for permission, for forgiveness versus permission, like really going in there. But I think when you are educated or you learn in this particular category, you're kind of in this world and you drink the Kool-Aid and you learn to kind of know what the rules are, know what the rules aren't, and kind of how to play in that particular space. Whereas when you're in a space that you haven't been in before, you didn't necessarily get the rule book. So you just go in and figure it out. And I think having that mentality then carries you through whatever new category, whatever new world you're going into.
Yes. But I also think that that's maybe why we're also like at the cusp of something very, very dangerous, right? Because if you are somebody who's like kind of like you're working in the space that you've worked in, you've trained your nice little Claude code assistant working on all the things that you've worked on. And it's literally yesing you through and you don't know any different. And so we have a lot of people, like, I mean, there's a lot of people in this world who are just completely unaware that they're being yesed to death. And I think that as a consequence, we're going to have a bunch of people who create new brands in this like really particular time right now,
Mm-hmm.
where they just sort of like are drafting off of existing things. But again, they're doing it because they were like, oh yeah, like I know I started this, I'm going to create this brand, da 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 da. And I would honestly highly recommend, like, if you have that expertise, go work in a different category and try and invent over there, because like at least you'll come with like a challenger, like, why would you say this to me mindset when you're talking to cloud. Like, whereas if you're just like in your own zone, like, gosh, what a dangerous place to be. You're like kind of in your own echo chamber for the rest of time.
Yes. I mean, I would argue that a lot of the visionaries just kind of had a vision and they went with it, even if people told them it was a terrible idea. So I think there's a balance to
Right, but
that.
there's no one telling you. That's the problem. That's what I'm
Right.
saying is like there's literally like no one telling them that anything is a bad idea. Like, and you're just
Right.
saying yes.
But I think sometimes visionaries go through whether or not they're being told it's a good idea. If they have a very clear vision, they kind of push through with that. I think a lot of what you're talking about is somebody that maybe doesn't have a clear vision but has the ability to do it.
Yes, which I think is
pushing through.
90% of the businesses out there.
Yeah. Fair. And I think the most dangerous thing anyone can say right now is we're going to keep doing it this way because it's how we've always done it.
Yeah, I mean, kind of always has been the most dangerous thing, but yes.
But I think especially now. Okay.
Yeah.
So advice kind of if both for like, let's start back where we were kind of from a career standpoint, right? So if you were starting out, anything you would change, anything you would do differently, anything you would tell people to do differently?
It's tough. I think, like what worked a long time ago, like doesn't always work now. Like I would say that if I were doing this and I were 18 today, I would probably not take a job. I would probably try to like start my own shit, and I would probably start maybe 20 companies in the next 10 years. Like I think that's going to be the version of having an internship that like, or having the right like entry level jobs. Like I don't think entry level jobs are really going to exist like in a couple of years. So I think you're essentially going to be creating your own entry level job, but like maybe just be ready to give up the entry level job that you've created for yourself like many, many times, right? Like start, and if you don't like it and you think that you could do something better, do something else. And I think that was always kind of the, like it's like sow your oats type of thing has changed, but I think but that is still, I think, really solid advice, because I think when what you don't know, like you just can't, like there's no better time. You're most free at that age. Like I think you're just always going to be the most untethered possible version of yourself in the best way possible. I just don't think that it looks like it did 10 years ago.
Right. So iterate. And what about for those that are kind of already in corporate, mid-career? What does that even mean?
Yeah. I mean, I would say anyone who's like 30 to 70 would say, assume that
I'm listening.
assume that you need to be evolving and expecting to evolve and asking other people to evolve if you're in a place of management into other domains. Like there are no more silos. There will not be any silos in the future of work, like literally none. Most companies in the future will be a vertical of like maybe 2 or 3 people maximum. And, if you're working at 1,000-person company or 10,000, like just iterate off of that. But like it's going to dwindle, and you're going to do more. So somebody today, I was talking to them and they said, you're either a lake or a well. And
okay, give me this. Break this down.
So there are people who are lakes who like to go across like large, vast areas, but don't but sometimes they have enormous areas of depth, right? Like Lake Como is like one of the deepest things, like it's deeper than many oceans, but it's still a lake, right?
God, fun facts. Learning so many things today.
But then there are people who like to be wells. And I actually think that and wells go just very narrow, very deep. And I actually think that those people also do really well in the age of AI. I think like very, very broad lakes or very, very deep wells. But people who think that they're just going to be kind of like a middle ground between those two won't do so well. So I would assume that everybody in your company wants to become a lake unless they specifically ask to be a well.
That's deep. Okay. So assuming you're a lake.
Yeah, I've always been a lake. I can never be a well.
Okay. I'm in.
And
Just
you are also a
checking in.
lake. But Dave
Yes.
is a will. So we're clear.
Okay. 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 That's helpful. Okay. It's a good thing to ponder. So if you're listening, ponder about your status, your water status. It's good.
Yeah, well, I think just like, I actually think deep expertise will be kind of lost over time, like during this like change making period, because you will like essentially be expected to become lakes. You'll expected to be able to go from like learning tech to also designing to also being responsible for the fiscal like quarter for your shit and like all of these other things. And many well expertises will kind of get like lessened or given to the AI. And so people who are still wells, like if you have like the ability to specialize in an interest, I think actually will still do well.
Yeah, but I think Dave's example for me really makes sense in like that lands for
Yes.
sure. I think that will always be. Okay, I want to then talk about brands.
Well, I'll flip it over to you if you want to give a takeaway.
I mean, I think it's about, as I think it has been for a while, like looking at other industries for inspiration. I don't think it's about like being in the pet space or the tech space. I mean, like, I wonder what the other tech brands are. AI is a perfect example. Like, think about, again, I think strategy will never be more important, has never been more important. It's really understanding, well, what do we want them to feel? Like, what are we really truly unlocking for our customer? Like, what are we really giving that? And then figuring out what that really is and being super fucking clear of what that is, and then playing around with it, being like, oh, okay, well, look at what gaps do it. Is music a part of that? Is entertainment a part of that? What's this world that we can create that's hitting what the consumer needs from us, but looking across industries. So it's almost anything
mattering.
but what your industry is doing. Mattering, but in a really fun way. Like, I think there's so much fun and interest that a brand can have because entertainment's important, connecting's important, but coming back to kind of what you're actually doing for the client and what that strategy, what that larger vision is.
Yeah. And I think also being willing to evolve that right now. Like, I think
Yeah.
what is fundamentally, what matters to us right now and what matters to us in 2 years are going to be vastly, vastly different, right? And you can't and shouldn't, in my opinion, change the contract, change the like where you're going, like what you've committed to, like that shouldn't change. But how you do it and how you continue to meet the moment that that person and your consumers, multiple, because there's not just one, are evolving in, like, will change. Like, whose silver is it going to be? Like, in who they've been in the
Oh,
last 5
can't
years
wait.
versus who they will be in the next 5 years, vastly different.
Totally.
What parenting looks like in this state. Like, I mean, basically everybody I know is just like staring into an abyss, being like, am I just telling my child to do what I did? And like, it's just the worst advice possible. Like, we're all fundamentally like confronting like these huge cultural shifts. We actually don't know where we're going. And I think it's the brands that say like, hey, like we made this contract, we're going to continue working on this contract together, but we're going to meet you in the moment of where we're going. Like, those will be the ones that win.
Yes. I love your contract framework. I'm so in.
Thank you, Desmond Bean. I've evolved it, but
Yeah, as you do. And I really think, like, I read an article as far as, neurodivergent thinkers and the parent of a neurodivergent thinker. I'm like, yes, and I totally get it. And you've seen this since the beginning, of how, because the linear thinking of like, this thing goes here and this thing goes here, like, nobody's going to need that anymore. So it was like plumbers, which again, I think you called a while ago that the industry
I
was
literally have
gonna
been
keep
telling
going.
people like for like 3.5 years, but now it feels like the conversation.
Right. But plumbers, right? If you're a plumber, you're in. If you're well, you're in. But really, like, you're going to have to think about things in a fucking different way. And you got to have that training, that ability, be able to be already doing that, already thinking that. Maybe it's not for this particular thing that you're working on, but the other thing that you were working on or experimenting with, like, you can bring that brain, you can bring that thinking, you can bring that approach to
Right.
what it is that you're doing. Okay.
Yeah.
The last piece of advice
Yeah,
ideas.
I mean, the last thing that's coming to mind for me is that, like,
Tell me.
sometimes in the past, we've had, this doesn't happen as much anymore, and I think I understand why now, is that we used to have some clients who would come to us and they'd be like, I'm thinking of one particular who was like, we did some strategy work for them, we painted the picture of where the brand was going to go, we gave them ideas of how to get there, I've recently been saying like, my job is often to like look at your brand positioning and culture and connect the dots 5 years out. Like,
Yeah.
how are these, and like connect them along the way, like it's a ladder, but it's like, they're really far out. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember like doing this work, and like this client was like, wow, like this is just so much to think about. And I was like, yeah. And then 2 years later, they came to me and they were like, I didn't understand what you were saying when you said it,
Right.
but it has fundamentally changed the way that I operate my business. So thank you for doing that work, even though I didn't understand how valuable the work was when we were in the meeting together.
Mm.
And I felt so validated. I was just,
It's
because I
nice to
remember
hear.
like walking away and I was just like, oh my God, like, did I not do what I was supposed to do? Like, I felt like I really did the work. And she was just like, she just wasn't ready. She wasn't able, she didn't have the expansive vision for where she was
Mm-hmm.
going. But then ultimately, like over time, she was like, oh, wow. Like at every point that like, is like, she's like, I kept coming back to like what you told me. And like, I was like, oh, right. This is what Chris and Kirsten told me. I think now clients hire us as like basically futurists who like, it's like we're futurists who like make your brand positioning like match up to where it's going, right? Like, you want
Mm-hmm.
to be here, but we'll tell you where the future is, and then we kind of like work on figuring out how to get there together, right? Like both your like where consumers are going, but also where your brand is going, so that you don't
Yeah.
like sit in today. And I think that now people come to us for that. So it's like
Yes.
when they get overwhelmed, it's like they chose to drink out of the fire hose, so it's like a little bit different. But I would say that like if you're feeling like you're making safe bets and you're doing like everything by the book, then you need to really be questioning that. Like if your team is not
Yeah.
coming to you with some scary thoughts of like where the world is going, and you're not just at least entertaining them, then you're probably in trouble.
Right. I think that's a great line. And just to be really clear, like when we present those strategies and when it's never, and I think the conversations get more and more interesting and heated and deep because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for CEOs. It's uncomfortable for CMOs. Like where we're going, and to be able to take that leap and to be able to push into that is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable in a way that being a CMO or being a CEO hasn't been. It's maybe been uncomfortable on the numbers but as far as really like the vision, I think we've been in a safer space for the last 20 years. And so I think moving into that is a little bit more uncomfortable, but that's also kind of where the magic is.
Yeah. And I think and there's literally not a brand that can, I think for a long time, like brands could kind of like set it and forget it and like kind of have a good run. And like that doesn't happen anymore. Like there's someone either coming up from behind, like
Right.
making it with AI, and like coming in and recreating your entire business in 18 months and taking you out, or somebody inside your company coming in and taking you out from like your career perspective. Like, so it's like you need to, like, everybody's kind of commanded to be visionaries right now. Like, and I think that it's time to flex that muscle, and the more you flex it, the easier it gets.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great call. Okay, what about somebody that has an idea like a newsletter, like good thinking, like something that they want to share, but maybe they're being told to like have this expertise or do it in here or kind of niche down.
I mean, so to be clear, I have actually advised various people to like niche into a particular like framework, right? Like, so I think that good thinking is a niche. It's a niche of like, I provide the non-niche. Like that is my service. Like that is my contract with you. But like I was telling somebody the other day, and I was reading their newsletter, and I was like, I come to you for these two topics. Like this is where I know your brain fires the hardest. Like I know that I'm going to find things from you that I never find anywhere else. And so so for me, like what I hear all the time is that it's like the connections I make between the things. Like that's
Right.
my niche. Even though I'm not I'm not writing about a niche, like that's what like universally, like every single person that I ever talk to, and I talk to so many readers, like that's what the people that love it for, like every time. And so it's not to say you can't niche. I think it's just that you don't have to do it the way that everybody else is doing it, right? So like I told somebody the other day, I was like, why don't you write about B2B in a way that nobody else is writing about B2B? Because in my opinion, B2B newsletters are basically just a load of trash that should be burned on fire and like never be read by anybody. And yet B2B is actually a super interesting space right now. There's tons and tons of like
Super
challenger
interesting.
brands coming
Yeah.
in there, Frontify, like,
Yeah.
like Collins, like I could name like a ton, like people who are really pushing the boundaries of what B2B marketing was. Plentiful, very exciting. Nobody is niched into that as a newsletter topic. She decided that she didn't want to do that, but I was like, that is my recommendation.
Yeah. I think that's a huge opportunity.
So it's not
B2B
to
is
say
killing it
that
in
you
many
don't
ways.
niche. I just think it's like find what it is that you want to read, can't stop talking about, and most of the time, like it will be because you can't stop talking about it because you're not really getting it from anywhere else, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I think of that more as like kind of really a service or like there's something that you're really doing. There's something that you're really providing. Like niche for me feels like it's got to be a category. It's got to be like something you can easily put into a box. But I think having an offering, and I think the other thing that we talk a lot about and haven't necessarily mentioned is like making sure that there's an audience. Like, but if you feel like it's something that you want to do, most likely other people want that too. Like if you're finding that there's something that
right.
you aren't finding and that you want, there are probably other people that want to do that too. But I think having an audience for having a customer for your brand is important.
Yeah, and I would recommend also, like, just to that end, like, I learn a lot from talking to my readers. Like, I ask tons of readers all the time if they can get on calls with me and tell me what they like, and normally we just end up becoming friends. But like I think that so many people like one, just try it, but then once you're trying it and you're once you figure out what you like find out what it is that's really, because sometimes it's just like helpful to hear, like often it's just actually reinforcement of like, oh no, the thing that I am actually interested in is what people are interested in. But a lot of people don't really ever talk to the people that they're like, again, because
Mm,
consumers, like brands do this all the time, never talk to an actual consumer. Like, Jillet would always tell me like she'd had 10 calls or whatever. And like I
totally.
think
She was the
that
best at this.
she was, and I think that a lot of it is that brands, like, you think you've niched into, like, a consumer, but that consumer doesn't exist. Like, that person doesn't exist. I have literally 10 different profiles in my brain of people that read the newsletter.
Hmm.
There's maybe 2 or 3 that are kind of the bigger buckets, but, like, there's not all one, and the more you talk to them, like, the more you realize, like, oh, like, this is resonating, like, this is fun, like, they might enjoy this. I can build this for this person and not build it for the other person. The people that read the newsletter are not the same who listen to the podcast. Like, that's fine. Sometimes
Right.
they are,
Right.
but sometimes they're not.
Yeah, there's some crossover. Yeah. I think that's I think that's spot on, and I think it's a interesting evolution. Like as you're saying that, I'm more and more aware as we've had this conversation, like stay in your lane really started as this like kind of rebellion against what you or I were told, as we kind of grew in our careers. And I think now it's really something that can really be quite dangerous, both in your career, but also even more so in your brand and how you're presenting, because we all want actually the exact opposite of that. It goes to us kind of throwing out the brand book in the traditional way that it's been done. Like consumers just aren't that anymore. They've probably never been Sally reads this and has this income and does this, but even, now more than ever, it's like so much more multidisciplinary, multidimensional than that.
Yeah, I think it ties back. I mean, I'll make another connection and then we can call this a day. But like, it ties back to why I think Salone is working right now. Like, Salone, like I was trying to explain to someone over text message the other day, like what is Salone versus like what it is now. And like, and
Yeah.
it was always a trade show, but now it's evolved into this other thing. But like over this last 2 years, it's evolved into like a platform for brands to show you who they are and where they're going from an experience perspective beyond the product, beyond like, like sometimes products involved, like yes, sometimes collaborations involved, but it's like a really dimensional version of your brand. And like,
Okay.
again, I think that when you've grown up doing the same thing over and over again, you're just like, I don't see the ROI on that. Like, I don't see how this like makes sense. And it's like, yeah, but meanwhile, your consumers over there like shouting from the rooftops about how excited they are to see you do this really different side of yourself. And I think they've always been interested in that, but more and more and more, I think that that's going to come out.
It's a great example. We'll leave it at that.
All right.
Get out of your lane.
Yes.
All right. We hope you enjoyed this. We'd love to hear your comments. We'd love to hear what lane you've been in, what lane you've gotten out of, and overall what you think. Enjoy.
Ciao. That was it for this episode of Good Thinking. Don't forget to tune in next week.
If you found this valuable, subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast app.
And don't forget to read on Substack for even more insights.
And if you really liked it, drop us a heart. We'd love to hear from you.
Ciao. Until next time.